Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow. And on today's episode, we look at Manchester City's huge win over Liverpool, but why doesn't it change anything about our opinions on those two clubs? We also discuss why Aston Villa's rise up the table isn't convincing us, whether Newcastle are letting down Eddie Howe, and we look at two central midfielders Manchester United could add in January. That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. So we're back for another Monday edition of the Transfer Flow podcast, and joining me is Ted Knutson, newly returned from the continent of your ancestors.
Or outer space, which is what the last part of the trip felt like, because, Vegas, baby.
There's like that's like the opening lyrics of "I Will Survive." Like, this is what you're telling yourself after after coming back from New York and going straight into a podcast in the space of a few hours.
It's good. I'm happy to be here. I'm always happy to chat with you, as you know. There was football this weekend. There's no football next weekend. International football doesn't count, so like whatever. But there's women's football and there's like non-league football, which is always like great to go see. So do both of those. And
people have a backlog of content that they can catch up on from us. As you may know, we've now released 3 full-length episodes over on our Patreon, patreon.com/thetransferflow. First episode, the two of us talking about how much managers matter, and Victor Gyökeres, how he's landed so far. Second episode, talking with Hayden Van Brewer about how teams can approach breaking down low blocks. And the third one with Neil Shelat, which was about why more teams are shopping in specific small leagues and how that can give them an edge, as well as those full-length episodes. We also drop B-roll over there, video B-roll over there. So whatever nonsense that we're talking about before we start recording or after we start recording or in the middle of our recording that is unpublishable. So we talk about usually whatever's annoying us that day. On our last one, I was quizzing Neil about his FOTMob addiction. I was worried about his use of the FOTMob app. Here's a little taster of that. We've got a clip for you. You ever closed the FOTMob app?
No. Actually, let's do it. Let me look at my screen time right now. Like, I am literally scrolling through FOTMob, and like not even FOTMob all the time because they don't have like all the leagues in the world. So even SofaScore, I'm just looking at scores and like tables to see what's interesting. So my screen time today is 3 hours. Do you want to guess which app is first?
No, I don't. Just tell me.
It's FOTMob with 59 minutes.
So if you enjoyed that, and I enjoy being involved in it, so who could possibly... You imagine how much you would enjoy it. Then please do head over to patreon.com/thetransferflow. For your subscription fee, you get access to a lot of extra content. You get the opportunity to ask questions. We're willing to cover basically anything over there, especially Neil. Neil's always pushing to cover stuff that is, you know, I would say barely football. But look, it's good that you've got it, because it's a rainy Monday in London, but we're covering the last weekend of action before, as you say, another international break. To sign off, we got a couple of big matches. We got Spurs Man United, and then we've got City Liverpool, an actual big match between teams that would, before the season, have said that they were hoping to compete for major honours. City beat Liverpool 3-0. I do think it was a pretty one-sided game, but the scoreline, I think, is kind of bananas. Like, it ended up 1.6 to about 0.7 on expected goals. About half of City's XG is the pen they missed. So they scored 3 goals from round about 0.8, 0.9 expected goals. Ted, watching this game, which I assume that you have now been able to see back, what stood out to you about this fixture?
Cagey a little bit.
Definitely.
I said this in the newsletter today, and I will stand by this. I actually said this a little bit on social media as well. Like, Jeremy Doku is the most unplayable player. And by unplayable, we mean like you cannot oppose him effectively. Like, unstoppable is the English way, I guess, of saying it. But like, he's unplayable right now. He is so good. And people are like, oh yeah, he was great last year. Look, he was fine last year, but he wasn't turning any of this stuff into end product. And now so much of it is getting turned into end product that like he is basically as important to City's attack right now as Haaland is. I think that's been interesting because like Pep, this is a different sort of player than Pep has given keys to previously. Maybe there's an element of like a Kingsley Coman to be able to help
Douglas
move the ball
Costa.
through the thirds. Yeah, Douglas Costa as well. That type of like elite pace player that he likes to have really wide. But the activity in the box is the thing that's like really kind of sparked my interest this year. And he's like 50% better than anybody else in the Premier League this year in dribble and carry OBV, like 50%. And the next closest one is Noni Madueke, which who I thought was interesting. Then there's like Grealish is down there and some other players too who are having very good seasons. But yeah, I have been like kind of shocked at how big the leap has been. I was not shocked by the fact that Liverpool were having definite trouble keeping City's wings in check, because fullback is probably their biggest position throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they obviously decided to do the "we're going to leave Salah high" thing, given that meant Doku and potentially Nico O'Reilly as well up against Conor Bradley, who I think, we've all kind of still got a question mark next to him, like whether he's going to prove to be Liverpool standard. That's a very high mark to reach. He's had some good games lately, but in this match, I just thought, honestly, the best fullback in the world would struggle with one-on-one with Doku again and again and again. And it was interesting though, maybe to compensate for the fact that he's giving Doku more freedom, Pep, and actually Slot as well in this game, adopted a much more conservative structure, right? Like we've seen a lot of 4-5-1, 4-4-2 out of possession from Pep lately. And in this match, neither team was pressing terribly aggressively. Both teams were trying to put this conservative structure in place. And I think that made sense given that there were stretches of the match when it started going end to end, and I thought absolutely nobody is in control of what's happening right now.
I think that I was looking at the stats, and like a lot of times when we look at the stats and we profile them in images on the stats bomb radars or in different types of images, you see things that kind of crop up that are pattern recognition. Pep's defending this season, like obviously it looks at times to be a bit like an Arteta 4-4-2 mid block out of possession, which has been very effective and I think is important to note. And at times, like it feels like he's learned, actually, he's sort of inverted this and taken some of Xabi Alonso's work that was done in Germany with Leverkusen and possibly starting to happen and really starting to take hold at Real Madrid, and adopted those elements as well. It's like if you can't press aggressively against talented teams, what are your options for not doing that? And for years, for over a decade, Pep had more talent than everybody else, and so like they could really hem them in. They had physical talent that matched up and probably was superior to almost everyone else as well. So physical and technical were definitely better than everyone else, and then tactical sort of became just a flow that happened over and over again. Since that time, they're no longer physically better than everybody else. There are times that they are technically better than everybody else, but because they're not physically better and teams have learned to kind of tee off on the longer balls, especially across the center backs and in those wide spaces, like it feels like he's had to take on a more conservative approach because like contain is no longer an option. And this game in particular, like you get Liverpool with a very talented attack, no matter what we think of how they've played so far this season, and he had to make choices, and obviously scoring some goals that were a little bit gifty or from distance helped them out in the situation, but they still were in control. Well, they were in control most of it in the important bits.
Yeah, I guess it's like they're not controlling. They used to just control all the ball, right? And now it's like, well, we'll control the zones that matter, and we'll do it that way. And it does help, when you can basically keep your structure, because I looked at the first goal Liverpool conceded in this game. Like afterwards, there were commentators trying to find, what was wrong here. Oh, the winger should have got out and closed down the cross. And I was like, man, it's like a 6-on-3 in the middle that Liverpool have got.
Yep.
And Haaland manages to score and score even with a little bit of luck there. And you just think, well, if you can do that, then who cares really? But I do think Liverpool out of possession, like Liverpool, I don't think they're worse as a result of this game. Like my opinion on these teams is not changed at all.
It is exactly the same as coming into this game. It was a City home game, and Liverpool are still kind of ropey, and like they have a talent dominance against a lot of teams where they'll end up pulling stuff out. Like they didn't deserve this run of losses that they had before.
Sure.
They were a bit up and down in the same way they didn't deserve like 5 in a row to start the season, because they were definitely not nearly good enough to have 5 in a row. But sequencing kind of matters, right? And we get caught up on sequencing. Like we talked in this podcast earlier in the season, I was like, man, I don't know what's wrong with Villa. Like, I don't know why Villa have started off like in the basement, because like their talent isn't that bad. They have the same coaches last year, and it's just really weird. But sequencing kind of gives the narrative a thing, and then the commentators then talk about the narrative, and it becomes something that gets etched into everybody's brain. There's a lot of luck in football. Just as Bournemouth from this weekend. Like, we weren't even that bad, but we lost 4-0, and I guess these things happen.
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty is with Liverpool, I still don't really see the path to everything getting better, you know? Like, Alisson going out for Mamadashvili at the same time as Trent leaving, like, that has compounded a lot of issues as well, right?
Yep.
You know, leaving Salah high is one thing if you've got guys who can find him. And actually, he did receive the ball high quite a lot in this game. But having it in that extra 5 yards of space that Trent and Alisson could get him in, the loss of that is just such a problem for them. And it also kind of feels like Szoboszlai is the only guy who plays with the intensity of old Liverpool. And he's like their most important presser, and I think their most important progressive passer. Like it feels like this team now functions around him and Gravenberch. And I'm not sure that the attack can really like hold its own in the press anymore, and it's not physical enough either. I mean, there are just a lot of question marks, I guess.
I think there are 3 functional problems with Liverpool. One is that they had a lot of change in the summer, and that change was pretty significant, especially in how they build up play. 2, they cannot press well. Like, I mean, that might even be the most crucial element. Like, their press is broken, and because it's so noticeable in the Premier League when teams are trying to press and they're not good, like Liverpool are mid-table-ish. If their press was like 30% better, they would be one of the top 2 teams probably. Like, they would probably be even better than City is right now, but it's not. And that might be the most crucial thing. And then the third bit is like their attack isn't fully firing, not least because I think they need to play in a different build-up style than they had before, because Trent is a different build-up than having somebody like Wirtz, who's a between-the-lines player. So how are you getting the ball to the between-the-lines players is a really crucial question. And I think the other issue there is like, you know, maybe you could overload that right. You could have Wirtz over on the right and Szoboszlai be able to play to him more often. And then you have Salah as additional element. You haven't had Frimpong to be able to sort of cause chaos together. So like so much change really has caused issues, which caused a lot of things to be thrown up in the air and tactically, and they just haven't landed on a solution. But if that press were better, this would all look very different and feel like a lot easier game. When you cannot press against Premier League players, they are so good that they will play through you, and they will play through you very, very fast.
And I think, I don't know with this group of talent how good it can get. It can get better for sure. Like I look at Ekitike and I look at Wirtz, and I think if you've got Szoboszlai in the 10, like then you can improve. I don't know how good you can be if you want to play Isak and Salah at the same time, for example.
I think that also, like from a training ground perspective, when Klopp was there, he spent 100% of his time on out of possession, which breaks my mind. 100% of the time on out of possession. But the issue is, if you're spending all of your time on out of possession, but then you've lost 2 of your huge possession components in Trent and Alisson, like, how are you rebuilding the possession links? Like, do you just hope that it happens naturally and organically? Well, if it's happening naturally and organically, it takes a long time, right? And one of the things Wenger always talked about is like the way that they played in this funky, beautiful style, and everybody had very good connective links in the passing game, was because he allowed it to happen, and he was very careful about new players that got brought into that system, right? Pep's super careful about it, but for defensive reasons usually instead. So you've got this issue in the training ground where, like, if you were spending 100% of your time on out of possession, which they aren't, and they're clearly not pressing in a way that's great, then you can't fix the possession game that also has its own issues. And so it is taking longer because you get 2 different elements together. And unlike certain tactics podcasts, I don't think that out of possession and possession are the same things. And I think they actually have significantly different components that you have to go through in terms of routines and terms of drills that you need to combine into a cohesive whole. There's a reason why there are
Sure.
out of possession coaches and in possession coaches across most of the top teams in the world.
And like you say here, if the press were functioning, then at least the kind of high turnovers, you'd get those like quick transitions that would kind of paper over some of the in possession problems. But yeah, right now you've got a bunch of guys who are getting to know each other. You've got Salah, who still question mark about like what his level is going to be for the remainder of the season. Wirtz, who's been given a role that actually wasn't his role in Germany. And in this game, it felt like in the second half, he was on pure solo mode, just trying to get the team up the pitch. That it's a big worry for them. And I mean, and actually, I should give a shout out here to Neil, who wrote a piece for the Transfer Flow newsletter about how City had tried to solve some of their progressive problems by using Foden deeper. And in this game, you could see it. You know, that in the absence of Rodri, one of the ways that they are building up is you've got Foden and Silva coming deeper. So Foden in this game had the same number of touches in the defensive third as he did in the final third. Silva had more touches in the defensive third than he did in the final third. These are ways that they can escape pressure. And actually, the first goal starts with Liverpool having the ball over by City's left-hand side corner flag. City win the ball back and Foden's able to play them out. And that's how they get up the field into the final third. Liverpool are yet to work out that particular wrinkle.
I think flipping it around, though, like it's also very worth remembering that City went through a massive transition starting like not quite a year ago, right? Like last January was the time where they're like, oh, we're screwed. We have tons of needs that we need to be able to bring in. And City are still finding their feet with that, right? So like when you have to do these major transitions and you have to teach the tactics, and sometimes the tactics are changing because you don't have players that can just solve every problem like a Rodri does or like a Trent does in your buildup, like it may take quite a long time. And this may just be a transition season for Liverpool. I think there are reasons to think that they can finish third or fourth, but like I don't think there are any reasons to think that they're going to be anywhere near the top two. And that's slightly unexpected given how much money they spent in the summertime. But I think also, as we said, going into the season, like they left it a little bit short. They left some positions that were a little short and a little short of depth. And maybe like they just needed to learn that what was missing anyway. So like they'll be more targeted in their next two windows, but targeted in a way that helps them solve more of their positional issues on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. And again, to go back to the point you made at the top, Liverpool fans, I don't think that this should really change your opinion about where the team is. And City fans, I think maybe don't get ahead of yourselves there. I've still got quite a lot of questions about City.
Arsenal fans are not getting ahead of themselves.
Man, I spent quite a lot of time this weekend being like, okay, so if this result happens, then it will be this many points, you know, ahead of it's horrible. I'm already not enjoying it.
Don't sweat it. Like you've seen so many times where like the wheels just fall off. Arsenal can have like, you know, a 9-point lead in the league and City manages to catch up like that.
Sure.
That boogeyman is still back there. It doesn't have the underlying numbers that it used to have. So, you know, there's a decent chance. The good part about this Sunderland result is like Arsenal were still quite dominant, and the two goals that came were, you know, somewhat defensive lapses. There were a lot of defensive lapses in the Premier League this weekend. There were a lot of goals, and part of that's just legs, right? Like these guys are tired. Lots of midweek buildups, lots of injuries starting to bite in. But yeah, like it was still a pretty dominant performance from Arsenal. Sunderland are actually a tough opponent. I thought they did a decent job containing Arsenal, but you know they could have had more goals in this game. But yeah, at the end of the day, 2-2. Like there are going to be a lot of those draws that happen along the way. Sometimes they're going to be losses. Like we've seen everybody stumble at different points this season. That's going to be the story of it. Last year, we should have seen more stumbles because there was more parity in the league. It was just that Liverpool got out to a very big league early on, and other teams had too many injuries to keep it interesting.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I was kind of like mildly impressed by that Arsenal performance, given that they were up against a back five. Given that I haven't really been impressed by their attack so far. Bukayo Saka had an actually really good game, which he hasn't really done that much this season so far. And they put up about 2 XG. Like it was pretty good. And the fact that Marino can come in and just play centre forward just makes me laugh every time. Like he's pretty good there, man. So I was broadly impressed, like by the quick switches, by the way that they were kind of moving Eza around to try and get those connections through the middle. I thought it was okay. And I mean, you talk about parity, man, but we've got the bottom 7 teams, right? So you've got Newcastle on 12 points, and then it goes all the way down to Wolves on 2.
Mm-hmm.
But from Everton in 13th, they are on 15 points, and it's then 5 points between them and Chelsea in 3rd.
Yeah.
From 13th to 3rd, 5 points. This is absolutely bananas. And admittedly, though, there are a couple of teams I want to talk about here. Aston Villa, as you mentioned before, Aston Villa in 6th. Aston Villa's expected goal difference is abominable. It is diabolical. I think it's the second worst in the league. No, it's the third worst in the league. I'm so sorry, Aston Villa fans. Man, their run. So they've been on this run recently. The fact they're in 6th and they're just behind Spurs, who are in 5th, who have the 4th worst underlying.
Who are worse? Yeah.
So terrible.
Let me just refactor this a little bit in stats bombs, which is a bit more accurate, right? Like you've got Burnley and Wolves in the bottom 2 of like negative 1.07 for Burnley. Wolves is negative 0.70. So like really quite bad. Then you get like a West Ham at a minus 0.39. And you've got Bournemouth at minus 0.30. And that Bournemouth match is like really big outlier with their Crystal Palace match. So like depending on how you model things, that comes out kind of weird. Then you get Spurs at minus 0.34. You get Aston Villa at minus 0.25. And you get Sunderland at minus 0.20. All those teams have negative expected goal differences and not insignificant ones, right? But the team with the worst is in 17th. Second worst is in 20th. And then, that set of teams we mentioned, Sunderland, Spurs, Villa, are 4th, 5th, and 6th. This is why football has a lot of variance. This is why it takes quite a long time for, this stuff to play out. And sometimes, in leagues that have a lot of parity, like actually Sweden this year, like you saw a team that was totally unexpected be able to actually run away with the league. Because if you stack up a bunch of results on a parity league and everybody else is struggling, like you just will end up getting pretty far out there.
Yeah.
There are only 3 good teams at the moment in the expected goal difference. And you could almost say that there are 4. There are 4. Let's do it that way. There's Arsenal, who came back just a tiny bit this week. There's City. There's the team that I found most surprising because I thought the wheels were going to come off and they didn't. 3rd is Chelsea. And then 4th is Crystal Palace, who draw too often to end up being further up the table, but they're at 0.49. So like there's just a little bit behind Chelsea and quite a good team overall. Although they have no depth. So we'll see how that goes through the season.
But Chelsea, can be optimistic because they've got Palmer coming back, I guess. But like Villa, I think start betting against Villa is basically my feeling. Like,
that feels expensive. As a professional gambler, I've been down that road.
But I look at this run. They were on a run of 8 wins in 10, 5 from 6 in the Prem. That includes wins over Spurs, City, Bournemouth. In that time, they've allowed 5 goals from 6.4 expected goals.
Yeah.
And they've scored 12 from 5.4 expected goals.
That's the one.
Absolutely insane. I mean, the Bournemouth game, like, look, I'm not saying, they didn't deserve to win the Bournemouth game. Like, Bournemouth game, it's basically even on XG. And Bournemouth, about half of their XG was total bullshit penalty, in my opinion. Like, to play them even when you've been ahead for over an hour, fine with that. Though also, funny example of commentators saying horseshit this week was the commentators on the multi-view saying, a lot of people don't buy into XG, and would you believe that Villa have scored 4 goals from like 1.5 XG? The very next conversation they had was, "We've seen some stunning goals today, haven't we?" And I was just like, "What are you saying? Like, put these things together."
Logic is not part of their strong suit, my friend. They did not, unlike certain people on this podcast. Good Oxford.
Cheers, babe. Thanks for getting it in. That is part of my contract. The thing about Villa is, Villa have scored 13 goals in the league this season. Do you know how many of those are from outside the box?
Ooh, I could check, but I do not off the top of my head. I would guess, having watched the highlights, I'm going to guess like half?
7 out of 13. Yeah. Just over half. So I mean, that's the same number that they managed in the whole of last season. And I'm sure that Villa fans will be saying, "Oh, well, we've got good long-range shooters like Morgan Rogers or whoever." Well, you're going to have to show me why he's better than Bruno or Szoboszlai or Saka or whoever. But man, like, they're getting outshot by about a shot and a half per 90. They've got the lowest shot quality in the league. They're at 0.08 non-penalty expected goals per shot. It's basically Villa's attack is playing Arsenal every week, no matter who they're actually playing. This really concerns me. And I remember before the season, we talked a bit about Rodgers, and I wrote about him in the Villa preview. And it was like, maybe he can become a 10 who can create, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And he's at like 0.1 expected goals assisted per 90 this season. So, and Emery, I think, agrees on this. Like, he kind of played a 4-4-2, 4-2-2-2 in this game, something like that. But my worry is Elliott and Sancho not getting in this team despite the lack of creativity. I just can't. That's a big worry.
Have you met Unai Emery's teams before? Creativity and Unai Emery are not necessarily a happy coexistence. So with Villa, actually, the thing you said actually has sparked something kind of interesting. Although Ross Barkley has the most expected goals of players that have played reasonable minutes in that team, which is kind of weird. But
cool.
It's just strange.
Okay. he scored a header with like the back of his head this weekend. So, like fair play to Ross Barkley.
That's what I think of when I think of Ross Barkley, right? From the start of his career. We talk about the narrative is that set pieces are dominating the league and emphasis on set pieces are dominating the league. And that's a little bit true. I do want to say that like the set pieces thing is mostly because it's nerds exploiting the rule book, right? And actually exploiting the rule book in ways that have not been exploited that often recently, but were very exploited back in the day, right? You're trying to make sure that the referees call things in your favor, and you put the challenge and the onus on them to call things that are fouls. England has different levels of fouls inside of the box and things around blocking than the rest of the world does. But, anytime that I've talked to elite set piece coaches, you're like, oh yeah, you look at what the ref lets you get away with. You then sort of design things around that. You design what the other opposition is, weak at, and then you try and go after it. But I think one of the things I've noticed is something you said just a moment ago, which is that there have been a lot of spectacular goals in this game. It feels like there have been a lot of spectacular goals across the Premier League this year. It feels like part of the response to teams being more condensed and trying to get better shots all the time is that we have opened the space sort of directly outside of the box for longer shots, which is also something that was predicted. Like, this is something that we talked about in detail like a decade ago. Hey, as teams get more condensed and try and block out these shots that are close to the box, you're going to open up the edge of the box for chances, and you want your good shooters to be able to take those chances as opposed to the bad ones that just happen to be in position. I feel like we've seen a lot of bangers this year, and those bangers are at least partly the result of players figuring out that, oh, I've got the time and space. If I take an early shot, either where the keeper is potentially unsighted or where he's not quite set, I've got a better chance than I would otherwise. And so it's another sort of counterbalance in how all of this works. It's not just set pieces everywhere. Like, people wanted to see good long range goals. I feel like we're seeing a lot of them.
And we talked about scripted shots before as well. So, like teams saying, okay, we can get Morgan Rogers this shot at the edge of the box. Like, sure, like maybe that has better returns than it would under normal circumstances. Plus, I think what might also play a part is where we are in the season. So I think as players get more tired, we expect them to get slower and for them to get injured more, but their technique degrades as well, right? And in the early stages of the season, I think people are hitting the ball a little bit more cleanly. Like, so some guys are ripping some shots that maybe by January, February time, we might expect some of those to dry up a little bit.
Or like they've been training and teams are figuring out how to train guys to hit the ball harder. There was some terrible
in this position as well.
Yeah, there was some terrible goalkeeping this weekend. If you watch the highlights, I try and link all the highlights in the newsletters when we do roundups. And like, you watch the highlights, you're like, oh wow, there are like 2 or 3 games where I was like, this was not a good goalkeeping match on either side. Like, rebounds getting spilled, just like dumb stuff happening. Fulham in particular, I think, were awful inside of their own box this weekend. Like, they could not get the ball out against Everton, and Everton like using Grealish and Dewsbury Hall to just pick them apart, which again, not ideal. Sometimes dropping too far. Like, spacing really matters across all defensive tactical stuff, but like inside the box, like when you're leaving Premier League players like 3 yards of space, or you're trying to get out to them quickly, like that means they have time to pick out who they want to, and they just do over and over again. So it wasn't it was a very leggy weekend. I was surprised to see the goalkeeper errors, because I feel like goalkeeping has gotten a lot better in recent years. But maybe also if guys are hitting the ball harder, like it makes the goalkeeper's job a lot more difficult. So that's another factor to sort of roll up into this sausage that we've got that's the Premier League so far.
Sure. I mean, I obviously I do not bet professionally, but I look at Villa, I look at these numbers, and I think I'm not having this bullshit.
Okay. Like, I like it.
They got Leeds away next, then they got Wolves at home, but then in December they've got Arsenal twice, Chelsea, Man United, Brighton away, West Ham away is their easiest fixture there. I'm intrigued. We will see how it goes, but like I think,
do you know that 2
Villa
seasons
fans,
ago their expected goals were also pretty terrible, and they managed to finish fourth? So there is history in this particular take.
I have a bit of a thing with Aston Villa for this reason. Like they annoy me every single year. Shall we talk about Newcastle then? Because Newcastle kind of in the opposite position, right? Where like we would say Newcastle prior to the last two games, Newcastle's numbers look pretty good. Last two games have really hit them hard. You know, loss against West Ham and a bad loss, and then this weekend, red card, gave up quite a bit against Brentford. So they've created under one expected goal across their last two games combined, while giving up about 4 of their own. But they're kind of in the spotlight at the moment because Jamie Carragher was talking online about how he feels the club hasn't sufficiently backed Eddie Howe. And I mean, in one sense, it was nice for him to point out the scale of Eddie Howe's achievement and that now we expect Newcastle to be good. And Newcastle have gone from 19th when he took over to 2 qualifications for the Champions League and a trophy. Mm-hmm. Like, it's been a good few years for them. Their away record sucks this season. They've spent a fuck ton of money over the last few years. I'm not sure I can quite get on the poor Eddie Howe train. I don't know about you.
I think my response when I saw Kara, who I like and who I've met in person, we've chatted about expected goals over the years. Like, I was like, this is like saying Eddie Howe should stop punching himself in the face while wearing a Newcastle mask because, like, you know, tactically Eddie Howe's done this, but Eddie Howe wanted a lot of control over recruitment, which is not Newcastle letting him down. They kind of got out of the way and gave him control, and now he's dealing with players that don't seem to be performing particularly well, even despite the large fees sometimes spent on them. These are 2 different roles. Like, sometimes you need to know where your weaknesses are, and you need to have somebody else that really covers those weaknesses. We have talked even recently about Eddie Howe and how he has actually improved as a tactical head coach quite a bit since his early days at Bournemouth. And he does seem to be a head coach that learns to do things much better. But Newcastle, we knew going into the season, they lack depth. Like, their starting 11 were very good, and then they lost Ishak, and like Voltamata is not Ishak. Starting 11 good, but then like we had questions. And really what it comes down to is the style that Howe settled on ended up being highly dependent on very good fullbacks, which Newcastle have, but who have not been healthy. And so all they're doing is trying to hold on desperately to the out of position stuff and make sure the teams can't beat them. But then in return, they're not creating nearly enough chances to be able to win matches on the regular. I think when I look at it, I kind of landed on the conclusion that this season, Newcastle might do quite well in the Champions League, but then that will be at the cost of the Premier League unless they made really big adjustments in January and brought in, you know, either more depth or guys just stayed healthy for the long term.
I think if everyone gets fit, like I'm still quite optimistic. You know, as we said, a lot of parity in the league, and they're down low, like down on 12 points. They're some way adrift. But, you know, fixture congestion over Christmas, it's totally possible. Like last year, they were absolutely flying over Christmas, admittedly with Isak. So it's possible to me. I just think like Lewis Hall gets fit again, and my expectation for this team really, really climbs. But
is Lewis Hall modern day Luke Shaw?
He's not that injured
yet.
He's not that injured
yet.
And sure,
but he's really talented as a left back, and he's actually really important to his team's like attacking fortunes. And you're like, every game that he's out, you're like, ooh.
Yeah, I agree in that. Like, who's responsible for the lack of high level creativity in this Newcastle squad? Is it Eddie Howe? I kind of think it is. And like PSR and stuff, those things are real. They've spent like 450 mil net since Eddie Howe came in. I don't feel that sorry for him. And he could have surely have made an argument to integrate Minter and to keep Anderson at the cost of something else. They could have sold someone else to make that happen. Or they could have not. I know everybody loves Tonali, but they could have not spent whatever it was, 60, 70 mil on Tonali. Like, especially when they were going to convert him into just like a guy who runs a lot. Like,
it's hard for me to like, you know, chastise them too much because they have had success, but they certainly have not set themselves up for success across their competitions this season. And, you know, who shoulders the blame on that? Well, you can't just blame the ownership. Like they definitely are signing off on money there. Anderson and Minta looked like exactly as good as people thought they were as prospects. One of my questions about Minta was like, was he even going to get time for Eddie Howe? Because like Howe is notoriously stingy about playing a lot of the young players, especially in attacking roles. And I was like, he might only get backup minutes, but he certainly deserves those minutes too. Obviously, he's an important cog in whatever Brighton are doing down there from week to week. I think Newcastle are going to struggle. I think they're going to struggle because they just don't have a deep enough squad. They're missing a couple of positions, and then the health issue and keeping their fullbacks healthy. If it's a recurring issue, that's actually a tactical problem for them, a tactical training problem for them. If you never have healthy fullbacks, camera pans to Arsenal, maybe you need to be a little more careful about how you're using those guys. But I think this team is relatively talented. I think they can go pretty deep in Europe because of how they play. They're very physically good. But yeah, I mean, at some point you do have to have your best players on the pitch most of the
time. Okay. We've got a transfer that we were going to talk about today, or a couple of transfers. Are there other games you want to talk about before we get there? I mean, like Igor Thiago, good. Spurs United, horrible game.
You clearly wanted to. You let off the show wanting to talk about Spurs United. Like you wouldn't have mentioned it if it wasn't something that you wanted to bring to the forefront.
What would I say about it? It was the worst game of football you will ever see. I mean, honestly, it was so bad, and like I don't know. Do I have anything to say about it? I'm pretty unimpressed by both these two. Actually, United had some moments in there. Like the fact that we're in a world where I'm more positive about United than Spurs should make Spurs fans like really quite worried.
I mean, on a neutral pitch, United are half a goal favorites against Spurs this year, like possibly more. Right? That's not a home away thing. That is like on a neutral pitch. If they, they're very different teams. The fact that Thomas Frank has repeated Brentford's first half performance at home last year, which is where they were just abysmal in the G-Tech, and now he's just transported it over to the giant stadium over at Spurs. They have like 5 total points at home, which is second worst in the league versus Wolves. That's a cause for concern. And it's kind of weird. Like it is pretty weird that that's happening. Like, what's the tactical setup there? Now, the good news is that Brentford got a lot better in the second half of the season. So like maybe that's something that Spurs could do as well, at least at home. I have all sorts of questions there. Like the team, I mean, you mentioned Aston Villa. Like I lost a bunch of money betting against Spurs this year, or at least like, have not won a bunch of money betting against Spurs. I've had very good results. Like if you're not following variance betting, like this was the first losing weekend in ages, but we talked in the preseason, I was going to bet 10,000 a game, and like I was over 200,000 at the start of November, which was pretty nuts. So, like we were up across all 3 leagues and just crushing it. That's not normal, by the way. I just want to like past returns are no indicator of future returns.
I told my wife, and my wife was like, why are you not doing this? Why are you not betting like this? And I was like, because that A, it's different when you're not betting that much money, and B, like when you there is the part of me that's like kind of, no, this is going to end soon, and you keep saying it's going to end soon, this run's going to end soon, so I'm like, I'm just fine, I'm really
you can never take the wins for granted, and this is true in football, and it's also true in gambling, and it's just that type of sport. But it's been a really good set of returns. But Spurs are that team for me where you were mentioning Villa. I was like, man, they have to like give up a lot more soon, right? They can't just keep doing this. And they have kept doing this for quite a long period of time. Liverpool came back to the pack, but Spurs are like, nah, this is irrelevant to us. We're going to keep getting results. Don't expect that to be a long-term case. This game was so bad overall that I think neither team should have released extended highlights on the YouTube packages. Like the basic ones were good enough. That was like, there were 0.83, like 0.84 expected goals. You had a very nice header at the end from De Ligt, like 90 plus 6 minute is the only, like, it was like the dessert that saves the entire horrible meal for the rest of the game. But the funniest moment in this match was like Ugarte getting pushed behind the goal because he was trying to mark somebody, and he's like trying to recover. Richarlison's offside, except for the fact that like Ugarte comes back on the pitch to make him onside for the goal. I was like, this is priceless. I love it. It's so much fun.
These two teams, man. These two teams always have the most incompetent games. There's something about them that brings out the worst in each other. But there's our segue. Manchester United might be interested incompetence. They might be thinking about it. How can we get it? How do we get more of it? Which teams have it, and why don't we? Fabrizio Romano has been reporting that United are interested in Conor Gallagher and Angelo Stiller for January transfers. So he said Gallagher could be an opportunity. Atleti didn't want to let him go in August. He hasn't played that much this season. He's like got 350 minutes or something like that. So he's between Baena and Almada on the roster. Angelo Stiller, we were pretty surprised that he didn't get a move in the summer. Don't know how much you're going to have to pay for him. Like mid-season is difficult, but given that they didn't have the suitors they expected in the summer, maybe the price is a bit better. But
I really struggled to believe that. I think there was something behind the scenes going on there, like a bit like the Rodrigo one. Like when there are no real rumors about a player moving, that usually just means the player does not want to go, and he's not told his agent to like get him involved in anything. I'm skeptical that this was a no suitor thing, given the fact that we talked about him, and there are literally 1,000 football insiders that follow our work. So like everybody knows who he is and knows that he's probably pretty good.
He would be an interesting player for United, and I think would make more sense than Gallagher. Like Gallagher is a bit older. His upper limit is still determined by his passing, I think. Like he's become a safer passer, but he's not a great progressive passer. He's not particularly creative. What he is a good defender. He's a good presser.
He's got a great engine. I agree with you on the attacking side of it, but one of his features at Chelsea was he was able to do it all and quite versatile in the roles.
Yeah.
Like you might only get an 80th percentile role or player in those roles, but like he could do the things you need him to do. He's like he's kind of a plus value Ugarte, maybe a little less good in the tackling.
Yeah, he's going to run around and do a bunch of stuff. The question, I guess, is in that 3-4-3 formation, you might prefer a guy who's more positionally disciplined than the guy who kind of like goes and chases everything down. Maybe, I don't know. And that is kind of where Gallagher's good at chasing everything down. And it kind of comes down to price actually. Like he'll be 26 next year. But Atleti paid 33 mil. If they're willing to take less than that, I'm fine with it. But I suspect that they are not. And I don't think United should be spending big money on guys who are that age because they can't just keep bringing in expensive 26-year-olds forever. Like the only thing that's building towards is a really expensive year in like 2030.
They can't just bring in expensive 26-year-olds forever?
Okay, they shouldn't.
That's a different take there.
I made the mistake of making a positive statement and not a normative statement. They should not do that.
If I were guessing, I'd say that Atletico are probably looking to get 50 to 55. Like they're looking to turn a real profit. Yeah. It's the English tax premium plus like United pay dumb prices for players. Like that's just kind of what they do. And they will blame the market for it, but you can just say no. Like you can do lots of shopping and say no too. But look, here's the thing. This is going to get me in trouble with United fans because I've been actually like remarkably optimistic about United this season from like very early on. I've said good things, even if I didn't like their transfer business that much for reasons. I would love the Stiller deal for them. I think that one would be a slam dunk. The question is like, what's his English fluency? What's his English Portuguese sort of translation element around it? Like, I don't know. He's real good. Conor Gallagher would also fit into that team, but I don't think you want Conor Gallagher and Mount and everything else that's going on there. Like you've got to make a real strong choice. And how much are they turning this squad over the next 12 months is like another good question. But yeah, still is a great answer for almost any midfield in the Premier League. That tells you kind of how highly we think of his versatility and his quality. And also like the needs that pretty much everybody has, which is great midfielders are tough to find, especially with big engines, and there aren't enough of them in the Premier League right now.
Yeah, I think trying to combine my worlds here. There's like a fashion influencer I follow, and she said, when I want something in my wardrobe that is kind of standard issue, then I thrift it. Mm-hmm. When I go and pay for something new and pay a lot of money, I want it to have a point of view.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel this way where I'm like, if you want to get a midfielder who does a bit of everything, but is not exceptional at anything, that is the kind of thing that you can thrift. Whereas if you need a guy who's going to be that first receiver out of the back line and actually build all the play for your side, go and spend the money. We were talking about this, Hayden and I, the other day, and obviously how wonderful Wharton would be for United. Wharton doesn't feel like he's available to them. Maybe he is, but I doubt it. So Stiller is a guy who's only going to be 25 at the end of the current season. I'm okay with that, given that he's a rarer type. And also this year, man, he's kind of on Kimmich time, because he's like maintained huge numbers of final third entries, and he's at like 2.5 passes into the penalty area per night, which for a midfielder is nuts. So yeah, I think he'd be a great signing for them, and I think that
know what I just heard you say?
Such a problem.
I just heard you say that he's going to Bayern. that's what I just heard you say.
That is also quite possible.
Do you know a team that loves that type of player, that has some aging players that they would love to potentially like bring in depth or replace directly? Bayern Munich.
If they plug in Bischoff and Stiller, yeah, that does sound pretty good. Let's not talk about Bayern Munich. That makes me angry.
Best team in the world, right? Didn't you have like really, really fun things to say about them last week that I missed out on?
No. I didn't say anything about
them.
Okay.
No, you weren't Bayern pilled at all.
What I wasn't buying what they were selling. What's the top end price for you on somebody like Stiller? Because he's still going to have 2 years on his contract next summer. So where do you think the price is?
If you knew that he was going to fit in and you were excited about him, you can probably pay 80, and like that's like market price, right? 80 million for a top tier midfielder that's coming to the Premier League. Like you're up for it. Maybe you get a discount for the fact that like you don't want to put him on any of your match promotional stuff unless like you want like an old timey boxing theme. But and then like Gallagher, man, the Premier League went weird this year. Like everybody else has massively down revenues. The Premier League's like still charging forward, largely because the international rights continue to go well. But yeah, it's hard for me to like overestimate the amount that Premier League teams will play for like a good midfielder. That's that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, Manchester United will always pay what you think they should pay plus some extra. There we go. At least we were able to end on a negative note for Manchester United. That's all I care about. I think that brings us to a close for this Monday's podcast. Like I said at the top, please do check out our Patreon. New episodes all the time, including over the international break. We'll be answering listener questions, so do head over to patreon.com/thetransferflow. While you're here, if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. If you're on your favorite podcast app, please leave us a 5-star review and sign up for the newsletter if you haven't, though I must imagine that all of you have at this stage. Ted, do you want to say anything before we get out of here?
No,
goodbye. You have to take your electrolytes.
I already took them. I did a sweat earlier today. Vitamin D supplements as well, really important at this time of year because it's freaking dark outside. Patrick's been doing some running and is like looking quite svelte and trim these days. You must feel good about yourself.
Let's not go overboard. I'm hoping to one day feel good about myself before I die. Okay. That would be ideal. But yeah, I'm doing it. I'm lifting my children. That's the main thing I lift.
That's good. Yeah, thanks for the support. There have been a bunch of you that have taken up the Patreon already. We know that like that's a slow and steady climb on the podcast, but I really appreciate the fact that like people have enjoyed everything that we've been producing and are telling us stuff that they want to see in the future, which is one of the best relationships that we can have.
Exactly. Thank you very much to everybody listening, and we will catch you next time. Bye-bye.